Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Mottern with Mottern Institute for Mind Body Wellness, and this is your weekly Words of Wellness. This week, what I'd like to look at is cognitive restructuring. Now, cognitive restructuring is just a big word for changing my thinking. And why do we want to look at cognitive restructuring? Well, cognitive restructuring is one of the most important things that we can use, one of the most important skills, one of the most important tools we have to change our behavior, to change our emotions, to change physiologically what is going on inside of me. And that's because you'll remember our concept of total behavior, which we think of as a car. We're going to say this is a front wheel drive car. Those front two wheels over which we have direct control are thinking and doing. I always have direct control over what I'm choosing to think and what I'm choosing to do outside of specific circumstances where I may be intoxicated or under the influence of some other drugs or what have you. And then the back wheels, which follow along, remember we're saying this is a front wheel drive car, the back wheels which go wherever the front wheels take them are emotions and physiology, physically what is going on inside of our body. So if I want to change my behavior and that behavioral modification stuff that we do, from a cognitive standpoint, now a strict behavioralist may have problems with this, but from the cognitive behavioral standpoint, we need to change our thinking to change our behavior. We don't do anything without thinking about it. Now that thinking may be on a subconscious level, it may be on an unconscious level, but we still have thoughts that are going there. Once we do things a certain number of times, it is reduced to the level of automaticity. It is reduced to the level of habit. That's an evolutionary adaptation. Once I do things so many times, the brain relegates that to the unconscious. The unconscious takes care of that, so the conscious mind can do other things, can pay attention to other things that are going on. That's part of what helps us to survive and has helped us to survive throughout time. The other thing that emotions do is affect our emotions. Now we have some very basic emotions. We have the emotion of fear, we have the emotion to soothe, things like that. These generally have to do with survival things. Once again, they're very primary, they're very basic. Outside of those few simple things, emotions do not exist outside of a cognitive context. Okay, so whatever we're thinking is causing the emotion that's going on. And if I want to change that emotion, I can change the thinking. Now, certainly we may be startled, something like that. Thunderclap, right? So we become startled. Okay, but we don't continue to exist in that state of fear outside of a cognitive context. Oh, maybe I'm going to get struck by lightning. What's going to happen? The house is going to catch on fire if I get struck by lightning. Things like that. And then, of course, thinking affects physiologically what goes on inside of us, physically what is happening. And we certainly know that. We know that if somebody says something demeaning to us, then I may feel embarrassed, but the thinking that's causing that feeling of embarrassed may be something like, oh, gee, I look like a fool right now, look like an idiot right now. Also, when I'm thinking that, I am also physiologically, perhaps my heart rate is beating, the blood's starting to stir some more, I may get flushed, etc., I may get out of breath, things like that. So those are due, once again, to the cognitive context that is placed in. So thinking affects our behavior, thinking affects our emotions, and thinking affects our physiology, physically what's going on inside of us. The physiological aspects of thinking are especially important when we're looking at stress and things like that. There are some fascinating cases of how changing thinking, changing the way I look at things, changing the outlook on my life has caused dramatic physical changes. Norman Cousins, certainly he wrote a book called An Anatomy of an Illness and talks about his experience with that and how his changing his thinking, changing his mindset certainly helped him overcome some physical problems that he had. So those are the more dramatic stories of that. But the reason we want to look at it, once again, is for behavioral change. We want to be able to change our behavior. We have some behaviors that may be causing us problems, okay? And then from the emotional standpoint, maybe I'm having emotions that are causing me problems, anger problems, depression problems, anxiety, stress. Stress is something that is especially harmful in our society. It's an evolutionary adaptation. It used to. It served a purpose for it. Now it doesn't. Robert Sapolsky wrote a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the premise of that book is that zebras, like most other mammals, have that stress response, that fight or flight response. But once the danger is over, for most mammals, they turn it off and they don't have to worry about it anymore. So for 3 minutes, perhaps 3 minutes, then they either are stressed and then shut it off, or they're dead, so they don't have to worry about stress at all. Human beings, we have the inclination to hold on to that stress. We were chased by the lion and we got away, but our brains keep thinking, well, maybe the lion's going to come back. Maybe it's hiding behind that little hillock over there. Maybe it's through the bushes. Maybe it's waiting to ambush me. So we continue this stress, which causes us severe psychological problems, causes severe physiological problems as well. And we'll get into those perhaps at another vlog that we do. But stress certainly is one. Post-traumatic stress is something that affects us as well. And once again, this is caused by our thinking. Okay, so cognitive restructuring. If I want to intervene on my behavior, if I want to intervene on my emotions, if I want to intervene on physiologically what's going on, then I can look at the thinking. And once I get the thinking working on this, then I can change that stuff. Now, once again, immediately in the moment, once again, thunderclap, startled. Okay, we're going to have that. It's nothing that says that we're in 100% control of our emotions at all times. But what it does say is that we can change our emotions if we choose to. We can steer our car in a different direction by changing what we think, we change what we do, we change our emotions, we change our physiology. So cognitive restructuring has certain steps to it. This is a skill. Cognitive restructuring is a skill. Anybody can learn it. Most of us do in some measure. Others of us to a lesser measure, and so we develop problems in our lives and we don't apply it in all areas of our lives, which we may. For example, anxiety, depression, stress, things like this. Knowing these techniques, we can apply these skills and correct some of those problems, as well as some behavioral problems that we might have. Need to lose weight, take a cognitive behavioral approach to that, right? Lots of good studies coming out on how to do that. Quit smoking, cognitive behavioral approach. We can do things like that. But what we want to do today is just look at the basic steps of cognitive restructuring. So cognitive restructuring has 3 steps. Step number 1 is to pay attention to our thoughts and feelings. Okay. Now, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts going through our head every single day. Okay. And how many of those do we really pay attention to? Probably none. Okay. Unless we practice cognitive restructuring, and then we may pay attention to a few of them. But most of our lives we run on automatic. Okay. We are creatures of habit. More so than we would like to think or we would like to admit. So 50 to 70,000 thoughts going through our head every single day, and we hardly pay attention to any of them. So if we're going to change them, if they're causing us problems in behavior, emotions, physiology, then we're going to have to recognize what those thoughts are that are causing us problems so that we can change them. So step number 1, pay attention to your thoughts and feelings. Step number 2 is recognize the thoughts and feelings that are causing me problems. Okay? Recognize the risk in the thoughts and feelings that I'm having. So I've paid attention to my thoughts. Then I need to recognize what the specific thoughts are that are causing me problems. And most of us know what the big thoughts are. That's not the issue. Okay? But by the time we get to the big thoughts, it's already too late. If we look at the stages of change, and we look especially at the relapse curve, right? What we call the relapse curve. So we have the relapse curve. At the top of the relapse curve is a change in thinking. I mean, we're going on our merry way with one set of thinking that we've developed that works for us, and then all of a sudden the thinking begins to revert back to thinking that didn't work for us. So that change in thinking starts at the top of the curve. Now at the bottom of that curve, that's where those big thoughts are. Okay, gee, I'm gonna have me another double cheeseburger. Okay, yeah, risk thought, right? I know that's a risk thought. I don't need to do this to tell me that that's a risk thought. But by the time I get to there, I'm already driving to Whataburger. Okay, I'm already getting there. I'm getting that double cheese Whataburger. Okay. At the top of that, I have some other thoughts that are easier to change. And if I forestall the thoughts, if I change that thinking, forestall that thinking there, then I'm not going to get to the bottom of it. So this is the reason that we need to pay attention to the risk in our thoughts and feelings. And then step number 3 is to replace the risk thinking with new thinking that reduces my risk. So those are the 3 steps of cognitive self-change. Once again, step number 1, pay attention to my thoughts and feelings. Step number 2, recognize the risk in my thoughts and feelings. And then step number 3, replace the risk thinking with new thinking that reduces my risk. Now we have a tool to help us do that. Okay, and that tool is simply called a thinking report or a cognitive report. Cognitive means thinking. So a cognitive report, a thinking report, in the new book that I have, Living Well, Guide to Cognitive Behavioral Skills Exercises. Major section of that is on cognitive restructuring. It goes through each of these steps and what we're going to go through today. But it goes through a couple of uses of different tools of the thinking report. So one is sort of a strict cognitive thinking report that has 4 parts: the situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs. Okay, and that's it. Another one that we can use is from Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy. They talk about the ABCDs. I think they may be up to E or F now. I don't know. I'm sort of old school on that. So ABCD is as far as we go, and that serves our purposes. And those are the same parts of the strict cognitive thinking report that we use, looking at situation, thoughts, feelings, and belief. For the REBT one, for the situation, we have the A, which is the activating event. What is it that happened? Okay, and we state that briefly and objectively. Okay, now objective is not subjective. Subjective is my opinion, and that is never going to be useful to me. Okay, we all know what opinions are like. It's not useful to me. I need to look at the situation as far as possible objectively. That means without judgment, without flair, without blame, as if I was a fly on the wall, right? So if I could take a picture of this, that's objective. If I could record this, what was said, that's objective. Okay, a picture we can lay down, we can all look at it, we can see it, we can say, oh, okay, that's what's going on. Recording, we can all listen to it, we can say, okay, this was what was said. Okay, so the situation or the activating event needs to be brief and objective, and oftentimes this is the most difficult part of the thinking report. Okay, because even though I do cognitive restructuring for me, it's nobody else, right? I mean, if I could change your thinking, I'd make a lot of money. People would pay me a lot of money to change your thinking. Can't do that. Okay, you're the only one in charge of your thinking. This is cognitive self-change, and that's the only kind of change that we have, is the self-change part. People can influence my thinking, but they aren't the cause of that. I have to want to change, right? So if we look at that, those stages of change and what have you, I have to be willing to do that. So once again, cognitive self-change is what we're looking at. So even though this is self-change, even though I'm doing this for me, when I try to put that situation objectively, very often I'm still want to make myself look good. Right? I want to think about myself in a good way. So I have a very difficult time putting it objectively. Many times over the years in groups and individuals, what have you, people struggle greatly with describing their situation objectively. So that can be a task. Once again, in the book, we go over some exercises on how to do that. But try to get it brief and objective, just like a picture, just like a photograph, just like a tape recording. Okay. The situation, after the situation comes the thoughts. Now when we write the thoughts, we write all of our thoughts. Big, small, it doesn't matter. Once again, we know what the big risk thoughts are. Don't need to write this stuff down to do the big risk thoughts. I know what those are already. It's the ones at the top of that relapse curve, right? So what's the top of that curve that I need to think about? For example, I had a woman in treatment one time who every week, this was residential treatment, long-term residential treatment. They did a lot of thinking reports in there. And every week she'd get in trouble. And so she would do a thinking report on that. And as we looked at those thinking reports, as we took those thinking reports and laid them down side by side and then looked at them, and that's the way you use them, okay? Have to write them down, number one, okay? And then you save them, lay them down, put them sequentially, look at them. And we saw that in every single situation in which she got into trouble, she had a thought of, gee, this would be fun. Now, gee, this would be fun doesn't seem like a big risk thought, but to her, it was. Because every time she had that big risk thought of, gee, this would be fun, down that curve she went until she ended up finding herself in a bad situation. So the big risk thoughts, we know what those are. But once again, by the time we get there, we're not inclined to change it at all. We want to change it up here at the top. So for her, every time she had the thought, gee, this would be fun, she had to learn to stop and say, wait a minute, am I getting ready to do something that may get me in trouble later on down the line? And that's what we want to do. That's the reason we lay those things down. We want to look at the thinking as we go through and notice that, gee, this thought is here, and it's here, and it's here. You know, I never thought about it as a risk thought, but I guess it is. And you'll be surprised at some of the things that are risk thoughts. Remember, don't equate risk thoughts with bad thoughts, okay? Especially when we get to belief systems, because they're not. They may not be bad at all. Remember, our definition of bad is if it hurts me or it hurts other people, or it doesn't get me closer to what I want, then that's bad, okay? But there's no moral judgment on the bad things. So risky doesn't necessarily mean bad. Don't think that the two are equated. They're not necessarily equated. So we have the thoughts in the strict cognitive are the B's in the rational emotive behavior thing, which they call beliefs. Now, they call everything beliefs. For us, beliefs have a very special meaning, but for REBT, everything's a belief. So the thoughts, for them, it's the beliefs. Once again, we write down all of our thinking, all of it, and we write down exactly as we hear it in our head, okay? Now, for some people that may include profanity and what have you, this is not Sunday school, okay? We have a purpose. If I start changing the thoughts that I have in my head, I'm not going to be able to recognize them, and I'm not going to be able to change them. I'm going to be stuck in the same behavior and the same emotions and the same physical feelings that I'm having because, gee, I just didn't want to write it down because it seemed crude. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help you at all. Whatever the thought is, okay, if you don't use profanity, fine, you don't have to worry about it. If you do, and from our history of the English language, we know that everybody has those thoughts, okay? Maybe subconscious, but they're still there. As we write those things down, write it down exactly as I hear it. Once again, this is for nobody's consumption but your own. So nobody's going to see this but yourself. So write those thoughts down, all of them, exactly as you hear them in your head. If you change them, if you leave thoughts out, it's not going to do you any good. You're not going to get anywhere. You're wasting your time. Okay? You're not going to be able to do cognitive restructuring. You think you are, fooling nobody but yourself. Okay? Step number 3 is the emotion, is the feelings. Now, when I say feelings, what we're talking about here is primarily emotions. Now, over the years, I've come to know that sometimes that includes physical feelings as well. Whether it's a physical feeling, whether it's emotion, it's the one word. Okay? People start saying, well, I feel like I'm... No, that's a thought. Okay? The emotion is one word. I feel anxious, depressed, whatever. Long list of emotions. Okay? We have that in the book. Okay? Long list of emotions. You can look it up. And most people don't know a whole lot of emotions. Okay? That's about all there is. Well, I feel anxious. I feel afraid. I feel depressed. I feel happy. And sometimes that's all they can get. A whole lot more emotions. Okay? Remember, good and bad are not emotions. Good and bad are states of being. Okay? Happiness is an emotion. Misery is an emotion. Good and bad just are states of being. They're not emotions. But lots of emotions. But apart from the emotions, sometimes people will put down physical feelings. Okay? I'm feeling sick. I'm feeling nauseous or something like that. And many cases, those sorts of things can be revealing as well. Once again, primarily what we're looking at is emotions. The physiological feelings can also go in there. I remember a person I had in group. It was a gentleman who was working with depression. He was suffering from depression. And he was doing very well for a time. And then he came in one day and said, I'm really depressed today. I wasn't going to come to group, and I had forced myself to get here, and what have you. I'm feeling better now, but I really struggled with getting to group today because I was feeling depressed, and I don't know why I was feeling depressed. Did a thinking report on that. Nothing really there that he had. And then what he figured out is that here in Texas, the cedar was bad, allergies were bad, so had a little touch of cedar fever there. And certainly physiologically, that same feeling caused by the cedar fever makes you feel very depressed, almost like that emotional feeling of depressed. And once he figured that out, he said, I'm not emotionally depressed at all. This is something physiological that's going on. I'm suffering from allergies. Made him feel much better. I mean, emotionally, at any rate, psychologically, it made him feel better. Physically, he was still a little under the weather. But those physical feelings can sometimes be risky for us. So you can use those. Be careful when you use them. Remember, mainly what we're looking at is emotions, but sometimes the physical feelings can lead us into relapse, back into relapsing into old emotions, back to relapsing into old thinking and behavior and what have you. Other things emotionally that are tied physically that can be relapse triggers for us. Feelings of sickness, just physical illness. Okay, for some reason, when you get physically ill, oftentimes you'll get a tape playing in your head of thinking, maybe just a few words or a sentence or a few sentences that just go round and round and round and round in your head like a broken record. And that certainly thinking leads to behavior. So if I keep thinking that, and those thoughts are risky for me, then I'm going to end up into that risky behavior. And that's simply caused by physiologically how I'm feeling physically ill, something like that. You have the flu, you have a cold, something of that nature, then you can get yourself into that mentally. Those thoughts just keep going over and over and over again in your head, which once again leads to some risky behavior many times. So when we're looking at feelings on the thinking report, pay attention to both emotions, but also the physiological feelings, the physical feelings that we can have. Those can often be revealing to us as well. Now, for the REBT things, this is the C, this is the consequence. So we have activating event, the beliefs, and we have the consequence. So I have this thing that happens, I'm carrying around these thoughts with me, and this is the consequence. And the consequence is emotional, right? Consequence is emotional, the consequence is physiological feelings, the consequence is behavior. Once again, those all as aspects of our total behavior caused by that thinking that's going on. And then the last part on the strict cognitive thinking report is the belief system. Now, once again, beliefs mean something different to us than they do to REBT. REBT because everything belief. Every thought is a belief to them. No. For us, a belief has a very special meaning. Belief is still thinking, but it tends to be thinking at an unconscious level, okay? And it tends to be categorical. It tends to be global. It is not specific. If my thought is about this specific situation that I find myself in, it's a thought, okay? If it's more categorical, then that makes it a belief system, okay? So if it's specific, it's a thought. Categorical, more global, that makes it a belief. So for example, okay, I'm having thoughts of situation, my girlfriend left me, right? Thoughts, oh, this is terrible, I must be a terrible person, how could she do this to me, etc., etc. I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling anxious, feeling miserable, and my belief that I come up with for that, and once again, the belief is where you get to play amateur psychologist, right? For the situation, the thoughts, and the feelings, all you're doing is reporting, okay? This is the situation, briefly and objectively what happened. The thoughts are what are going on inside my head. I'm just writing those down. Same thing with the emotions. I'm just writing those down. And just to go back to the emotions for a minute, another reason that we look at those is because, once again, I don't have an emotion without a thought behind it, so it acts as a double check on my thinking. I may not know what I'm thinking at the time, but I know that I'm feeling this, so I can stop and say, wait a minute, I know I'm feeling this, I know I feel this, so what am I thinking that is causing me to feel this? So it sort of acts as a double check that way. And then we have the belief system. And when I get to that belief system, maybe if I say, Charlene was a bad person, and that's the reason she didn't like me. Because we're thinking about Charlene or whomever it happens to be, then that makes it specific to this situation. Okay. Now, if I had more of the thought, women don't like me, women are deceitful, something like that, that's more global. Okay. It indicates I may have a bigger problem. Okay. So thoughts are specific, beliefs are more global, they're more categorical. They're unconscious, so this is where we get to play the amateur psychologist. And the way I get to beliefs, I may start out with a thought, and then I ask myself, why? Why am I thinking this? Why do I think Charlene is evil? Why do I think Charlene doesn't like me? Well, it's because she mistreated me. Okay, so what? Okay, so what does that have to do with anything? She mistreated you. Why does that make a believer? Well, people shouldn't mistreat each other. Okay, that's global. People shouldn't mistreat each other. Okay, that's more categorical. That doesn't deal just with this situation. Okay, and remember that beliefs may come up with many beliefs. You look at the old iceberg, right? The tip of the iceberg, that's the thinking, that's the conscious thought that we have. All those beliefs, everything below the conscious level of awareness, below the water there, those are the belief systems. So we may have many different beliefs operating. This particular one, well, people shouldn't mistreat each other. Okay, that's global, that's categorical, and anytime that I catch myself saying should or ought, or especially must, then I know I'm on the trail of a belief. Okay, so pay attention to those things. Well, people should be this way. People ought to do that. I'm on the trail of a belief here. Okay. Now I can get further down from that. I can ask myself, well, why shouldn't people mistreat each other? Okay, well, it's not right. Mistreating people is not right. Okay, well, why is it not right? I can continue this. Now, if I start going back up, if I start circular thinking, then I have to watch out for that. That's one of the things I have to watch for. But I want to look at as far down as I can go. Once I ask myself why about 5 times, I'm probably down somewhere, as long as I keep going down and not circling around. Probably get to a core belief. Okay, remember those core beliefs are formed by the time we're about 7 years old, right? Somewhere between 5 and 9. Jesuits used to have a saying, right? Give us a boy for 7 years, and we'll give you the man, right? Once we've changed that belief system, established that belief system, the rest of our behavior for our life is pretty much set based on those core beliefs, unless we do cognitive restructuring, unless we go back and change those. And oftentimes these beliefs that we have, once again, this belief of people shouldn't mistreat each other, is that a bad belief? No, it's not a bad belief at all. Is it a risky belief? It might be a risky belief for me if, because I find that people do mistreat each other, people shouldn't, but people do mistreat each other, then I find myself avoiding relationships. I avoid situations that bring me into contact, especially intimate contact with other people. Don't open up to people, things like this, which creates numerous other problems, okay? But that may be caused by that belief. And there are many other problems that may be caused by the beliefs. That's just an example of that. So getting down to that belief system, and once I've identified it, then I have to change that, okay? Once I get through all of that, okay, and this makes the D on the REBT side, A, B, C, D, activating event, beliefs, consequences. Then we have the D, which is the disputing belief, right? This is what we do now. Once we've got all the situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, we go through, right? We go through those and we pick out which one of these are risky, which of these thoughts are risky for me, which of these emotions are risky for me, which of these beliefs are risky for me. We just mark those, okay? Just mark them with a little asterisk beside them, or underline them, put them in a square, whatever you want to do. Just identify them in some way that you can pick them out. Because then in step number 3 is to replace the risk thinking with new thinking that reduces my risk in the situation. So step number 1, once we've gone through situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, that's step number 1. Step number 2, we go back and identify this is the risky thinking. Step number 3, that's when we replace the risk thinking, and that's the D in the REBT stuff, which is disputing beliefs. Okay. Now we would call that corrective thinking. Once again, they call everything beliefs. We would say this is just the corrective thinking on this. So I go back and I look at those risk thoughts that I've marked, and I say, is this true? Okay, I use some disputing tactics, right? Is this really true? Charlene hates me. Going back to our example, right? I don't know anyone named Charlene. Just throw that in there. Charlene hates me. Well, is that true? Does she really hate me, or does she just not want to be boyfriend and girlfriend or whatever anymore? Well, maybe she just doesn't want to. She didn't say she hated me. Okay, so sometimes I have to do that disputing in there. And then, so what's my new belief? Well, she just is not interested in a relationship right now. Okay, it's made me feel better? Yeah. Okay, so it gets me out of that depression. Okay. Once again, those disputing beliefs, the disputing thinking, that corrective thinking, going back, changing all of the thinking that we have that we've identified as risky. Now, when we get to beliefs, it's a little more difficult. Remember that we said those core beliefs were formed somewhere around the age of 7, right, between 5 and 9. So we don't really flip our belief system. Okay. Now our thinking, we can flip it. Charlene hates me. No, Charlene doesn't hate me. Okay, we can flip that. When I get to people shouldn't hurt each other, and just as let me clarify here, my beliefs are always about me. Okay, my beliefs are always about myself. So it's people shouldn't hurt other people. It's not really my belief. My belief is people shouldn't hurt me. Okay, so I have that belief of people shouldn't hurt me. All right, when I get there, I'm not going to flip that, nor would I want to. The flipping that we pay, people should hurt me. That's a ridiculous belief. Nobody wants to have that belief. Okay, it's not healthy. Okay, so we don't want that belief in there. And even if we did, we couldn't do it. If I believe one thing, I'm not going to believe its opposite. Okay, so when we're working with beliefs, when we get those unconscious categorical statements that we have, okay, then what we have to do is we have to modify them. So when I was talking about changing beliefs, I'm talking about modifying beliefs. Okay, we don't flip them. Okay, and the modification of the beliefs, oftentimes one of the primary beliefs, and our beliefs are very similar because we're human beings and we have the same human experience. Our specific experience in lives may differ somewhat, but overall our experiences as human beings are the same. So, at least in America, one of the beliefs many people have is I should be able to do what I want to do. Okay, now is that a bad belief? No. Does it cause people to get into trouble? Oh yeah. Okay, it causes a lot of people to get into trouble. So how do we? I can't change my belief. I shouldn't be able to do what I want to do. We don't want that belief. Okay, so how do I modify that? We may modify it in some way. Well, I should be able to do what I want to do as long as I'm not hurting myself or others. So we just add a little modification to it. So I'm still able to do what I want to do as long as I'm not hurting other people, as long as I'm not hurting myself. I should be able to do that. So we add some modification to it. Now, is me eating my double cheeseburger because I'm depressing about Charlene leaving me, is that good for me? No. So once I start to modify that belief a little bit, it may be more beneficial to me. And so that's what we want to do. We want to get down to that belief system because ultimately the beliefs are what determine all of our behavior. Okay? Can't express enough how important it is to get to the belief system. This is where the therapy takes place when we're doing therapy, is it the belief system. Now we can look at changing my thinking. We can dispute the thinking that we have, the thought modification, phrase modification, things like that. We can do that over time. That's how we sort of modify the belief system, but we have to know how to modify it. We have to know what the belief is to know how to change it, to modify it into a more useful manner to us in our lives, something that's not causing us harm, and hopefully something that's working for our favor. So, situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs. Okay. Step one, pay attention to all of those. Okay, that's what we're doing. All the thoughts, all the feelings, all the beliefs. Step number two, identifying the risk thoughts, the risk beliefs. You'll notice we didn't identify changes in emotion because why? Well, emotions are caused by thinking. Okay, trick question. Okay, so when I change my thinking, the emotions will automatically change. This is why we use cognitive restructuring for things like depression, for things like anxiety, for things like stress. Okay, change the thinking, I change the emotion. Ultimately, like I said, we have to get to the belief system. We have to work on that. It's very difficult to change the belief system. Once again, it was formed when we were very young. It's very entrenched in us. Paradigms are at work all the time in our life, and when paradigms are at work, we tend to see things and experience things and hold on to things that support those original beliefs, while we tend to reject the things that don't. Okay, so very difficult. The Greeks, Stoics were invented, ones who invented cognitive restructuring. This isn't something new. Okay, Stoics invented this a couple thousand years ago. We're just practicing it today, catching up with the Stoics there. For the Stoics, the Greeks, they called thinking fantasia. Okay, thinking is fantasia. Fantasia is where we get fantasy, right? That's what a thought is. It's just like the wind. Okay, changes. Okay, all the time. We can change our thoughts whatever we want to. Okay, we're in direct control of our thinking. We can change those whenever we want to. Beliefs, however, they called fantasia cataleptica. Those were fixed thoughts. So thoughts, that fantasia, those fantasies are like the wind. Beliefs, fantasia cataleptica, that's like a rock. Okay. Now, over time, wind can shape rock. We see that in our national parks, Moab, Utah, beautiful structures we have there. Over time, we can change those, and that's what we want to do ultimately, is to change that belief system. Because if we don't change the belief system, remember, I can change my thinking anytime I want to. I can change my thinking, I can change my behavior, I can change my emotions anytime I want to. Okay, and we do it. We do it all the time. Okay, in many things. So I can change those things anytime I want to, but until I change the belief system, I'm going to keep reverting right back to where I was before. And this is oftentimes what we see in treatment, right? We see people who come in, they do very well, they learn cognitive restructuring, they learn to change their thinking, they're able to apply that skill, and then they stop using the skill, and guess what happens? The beliefs didn't change, so once again they start to influence the thinking, influence the behavior, influence the emotions, physiology, etc. So that's what we say when we look at that relapse curve. So we changed our thinking, we're doing well, we're going along, but you know what? We stop using this skill at some point. And at that point, then the whole belief system, that unconscious thinking kicks in. That's at the top of that curve. And then we're pulled back down into the old thinking, old behavior, etc. So we have to do this to change the belief system. If you want the wind to change a rock, it's got to be blowing all the time. Okay? Can't just blow once in a while. It's not going to do anything. Okay? So ultimately, what we're looking at is changing that belief system so we can change the behavior, we can change the emotions, we can change that total behavior that we have, all aspects of that. Once again, based on that cognitive wheel, looking at the belief system, changing it. So just to review, okay, cognitive restructuring, this is cognitive self-change. I'm the only one in control of this. I'm the one who drives my car. Nobody else drives it. I have direct control over that thinking, and I control that thinking to control the behavior, control my emotions, control my physiology. Once again, it's all going on at the same time, right? Maybe startled, I get angry, something whacks me upside the head, I have a flash of anger after I have a flash of shock. But I can choose to drive that car toward the anger, or I can choose to steer it in a different direction and do something else. That's my choice. Okay, so we have that ability to change all of that through the use of the cognitive restructuring, through the use of those thinking reports, that tool that we have. Once again, basic thinking report, it's in the book, situation, thoughts, feelings, beliefs. Has to be written down. Write it down on anything. Keep it in a notebook, write it down on a paper towel, write it on a piece of toilet paper. It doesn't make any difference, but it has to be written down. I can't do a thinking report in my head. Now, cognitive restructuring itself, once I've figured out what the risky thought is, once I catch myself thinking that risky thought, once I know what the new thought is that I'm going to use, that I do in my head. Okay? Cognitive restructuring, I do in my head. And basically, cognitive restructuring is catching myself thinking what causes me trouble and talking myself out of it. That's all it is. Cognitive restructuring. How I talk myself into trouble, how I talk myself out of trouble. But in order to do that, I have to know what the thinking is. 50 to 70,000 thoughts. We don't pay attention to any of them. Okay, so paying attention to them, recognizing that risky thinking, changing the risky thinking, modifying that, and then I start to apply that to my life. The belief system, once again, that's the most important part. It's going to take constant effort, daily effort on that. Once again, think wind, rock, right? The wind changes all the time. I can change my thinking anytime. I can talk myself out of anything that I want to talk myself out of. Problem is, till I change the belief, I'm going to be sick, I'm going to be tired, I'm not going to want to change my thinking. It's going to fall right back into that old thinking, old behavior, old emotions, and physiology that I don't enjoy. Okay, so cognitive restructuring, we have those 3 steps that we use. Pay attention to our thoughts and feelings. Okay. Step number 2, recognize the risk in my thoughts and feelings that cause me problems. Step number 3, replace the risk thinking with new thinking that reduces my risk. We have a couple of thinking reports in there, and I go through once again in color on those. Go through an entire thinking report using the strict cognitive report, which we call a Cognitive Phenomenological Report. Phenomenological just means in the moment. And that's when we want to do these. We want to do these as close to the time that it happens as possible. Okay, don't want to wait 2 or 3 days. Don't want to wait a week later to do it. I will remember the big risk thoughts, but I won't remember those little risk thoughts that are a whole lot easier for me to change my thinking and behavior. So we go through that with the strict cognitive report using the CPR, the Cognitive Phenomenological Report. And then we also go through that with going through the ABCDs of rational emotive behavior therapy. So a couple of different ways to go through that. I think in the book we also go through the 4 questions that Byron Katie has. If you're not familiar with Byron Katie, she wrote a book called The Work. She's got her website, I believe, is thework.com. She has a lot of free resources on there. Her thinking report looks a little different than ours, but all the elements of it are still there, and she's still doing cognitive restructuring. So there's a lot of different ways to do cognitive restructuring that are out there. We cover the 3 of them here in the book. You may be able to find other ones out there as well, but it's so very important. Once again, can't stress enough. One of the major parts of the book that we have, and one of the major parts of therapy that we do, especially in cognitive behavioral therapy, is that cognitive restructuring. Lots of people who work on old beliefs, I'm worthless, right? They have that belief they carry around, I'm worthless. We have to change that. So we have to look at changing the thinking, identifying when I catch myself telling myself, oh, I'm worthless, I'm not worth anything, I deserve this, and what have you. I have to catch myself in that moment, and I have to change that thinking, do some positive self-statements and what have you. I have to do that all the time. Okay, and that way I can start to shape, modify that belief system to get to where I want to be. So that's cognitive restructuring. If you would like some personal instruction with that, then feel free to call us at Mottern Institute for Mind Body Wellness. It's down in the bottom. You can get our information there. Go view the website, like us on facebook.com/Mottern Institute, or at the website, once again, www.motterninstitute.com. I'm Dr. Ron Mottern. This has been your Weekly Words of Wellness.